Hey, I'm alive, and I'm about to make that everybody's problem. At the end of every movie and series I react to, I ask you what the show is asking us. Even the most banal piece of media has a question for its audience, and there is a lot of merit in watching TV purely for the enjoyment. But with the sheer amount of crap that is out there, and the fact that some of that crap can be pretty insidious with its messaging, we owe it to ourselves to ask and answer those questions a bit more thoughtfully, simply for our own peace of mind. On the surface, American Dad isn't much more than yet another monument to Seth MacFarlane's triumph over Adam Sandler in the early 2000s, but it's gone on so long for a reason. American Dad is an absurd show.
Yo!
Especially in the later seasons.
'Cause I'm the straw that stirs the drink, biatch.
Absurdity doesn't imply a lack of purpose. As a matter of fact, satire relies on absurdity because it's not just about making fun of people you think are stupid. It's a bird's eye view of a systemic problem, which means that ridiculing marginalized communities is not satire by definition. That's why American Dad is largely considered better than Family Guy, because it spends more time punching up than down, although, you know, it's not perfect by any means.
And a good media crusade is always a solid vote getter.
Contrary to popular belief, American Dad didn't abandon its satire roots. They just had to be more subtle, and maybe even a bit more vague. The show can be split into two eras, essentially before and after Mike Baker left the show, after it was initially canceled on Fox after season 12. Season 1's A Smith in the Hand and season 15's My Purity Ball and Chain are very, very different, even though they're about the same thing, which is the ills of abstinence-only education.
So you're saying I should never ever have sex before marriage?
That's right, or angels will kill you.
With Stan being in the CIA, I'm surprised there are no episodes that are specifically about redaction, but I think they took a more subtle approach because several of his episodes, especially about parenting, are about lies of omission. And this can go from anything to soft-serving important information to straight-up brainwashing, like in the episode Halius. These episodes start off with Stan saying that he wants to protect his loved one, be it Steve, Haley, Francine, or sometimes even Roger, from some terrible truth or decision. Yet, in the end, we find that he's only protecting himself because he's terrified of change and vulnerability, because his uber-masculine conservative community considers these things weaknesses.
Because you're a lady! Oh yeah, I'm sensitive.
I am not a lady!
Somebody's gonna be in my comments rolling their eyes going, it's not that deep, but satire is inherently that deep. And so, keeping Stan's antics in mind, the show asks us, can you protect your loved ones from themselves? If so, to what end? And if not, how can you make sure that they will protect themselves? A Smith in the Hand and My Purity Ball and Chain are two episodes about the talk, or the birds and the bees, or what have you. It's a dreaded hallmark of parenting. It's worth noting that both of these episodes were made in the throes of ultra-conservative presidencies. As a matter of fact, the show was originally made to specifically mock Bush-era politics.
We're a terror alert orange, which means something might go down somewhere in some way at some point in time, so look sharp!
While season 1 is far more heavy-handed, Stan's core character remains the same. He's an exaggerated view of their ideal male constituent.
That's my Stan the man.
Though nowadays he's more...
I am very socially liberal, I am fiscally conservative.
I discussed this in my video about content bans, but like Reagan before them, these regimes often talk about protection, particularly protecting the children.
Politicians have traditionally hidden behind three things: the flag, the Bible, and children.
Protecting children always sounds noble, but more often than not, they're being used as shields, especially when it comes to sharing information. Both episodes boil down to one thing. Stan wants to protect Steve from the long, hard truth.
See, if I tell you about it, it won't be a mystery. It'll just be a fact. An ugly, moist fact.
And Steve is worse off for it.
I don't need sex if diversion therapy?
Stan believes the human body and its urges are inherently filthy. In season 1, it was because he was essentially told he would be punished if he ever indulged in them. In season 15, he believes that he's actually broken because of the way he received the talk, which was honestly a legit trauma when he was young. In both cases, Francine doesn't do much as the younger parent, which leads him to greater and greater extremes, especially in My Purity Ball and Chain.
And I'm out.
A Smith in the Hand takes a more literal approach, with Stan's reluctance causing actual pain when he encourages Steve to do hobbies as opposed to self-abuse. He gets an injury that leads to him finding his happy spot, and that newfound freedom leads to overindulgence. There's even an Idle Hands reference, if you remember that movie. Naturally, he gets caught, and unfortunately, by Steve, which leads to more injuries.
The arm will heal, but you know what won't? This!
Ashamed of his baser instincts and unwilling to admit that he screwed up, Stan takes on a media crusade to kill the urge and takes Steve down with him.
And a good media crusade is always a solid vote getter.
This leads Francine to step up and finally tell Steve that puberty might be gross, but it is normal, and keeping that information from him will only cause more pain. My Purity Ball and Chain makes that pretty clear from the jump, because the longer Stan waits to give Steve the talk, the more destructive his habits become. When Steve wants to hang out with a girl from a purity group, Stan takes advantage because he doesn't want to give Steve the talk, not because he can't handle it, but because Stan can't handle it. The purity group ends up being a cult. It's a cult. Seth MacFarlane and American Dad's other showrunner, Matt Weitzman, have been highly critical of Christianity before, but this episode stays away from any obvious religiosity. But I mean, look at the way the girls are dressed, and in the spiel about purity of body and mind, and
That's how
this,
us virgins roll.
it's pretty obvious what they're hinting at. But the interesting thing about this episode is telling Steve the truth isn't painless.
Jump kick!
The most important thing you need to remember when it comes to learning and research is that it's not about emotional validation. In fact, a lot of research, especially when it comes to history, is gonna make you feel pretty gross. It can make you upset or angry or even tangentially guilty. It's natural to want to avoid those things because nobody wants to be uncomfortable, but the truth is uncomfortable. The talk is uncomfortable and awkward, which leaves kids kind of recontextualizing where their younger siblings might have come from, you know? And while it is natural, puberty is gross. It's uncomfortable. The truth isn't impartial, but it is unfeeling, and you can't have trust without the truth. So when American Dad asks us the question, can you protect your loved ones from themselves? Their answer is no. No, you can't. Because your loved ones, no matter how you see them in your eyes, are still their own people, and trying to make those decisions for them undermines their free will, which means you don't really want to protect them. You want to control them, because that makes things easier on you because you don't have to do the hard thing. Placing trust in someone, particularly someone young and impressionable, is hard. But if you want them to protect themselves, you have to. What American Dad wants to tell you in these episodes is that all you can do at the end of the day is give your loved one, in this case your child, all the information they need. And you have to trust that they'll make the right decision. Not only that, but it won't just be a one-time thing. They will keep coming back with different, harder questions that will need more specific answers. It's a process, and they will keep coming back to you, and they need to be able to trust you to give them the right answer. Cutting them off from information is easier. Telling them the truth will be better because you don't want them learning on the fly during a crucial moment. Sometimes it really is that deep.